Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Bonds and Stories, we retell those moments honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. My name is Nora Hale. I'm 28 now, but that spring evening still sits under my tongue like a copper coin. Senior prom was supposed to be easy to love, ribbons on invitations, a hired car at the curb, perfume misting the hallway. I stood at the top of our narrow staircase in a silver blue dress, bought with 3 weekends of wages, one hand on the banister, the way you steady a fragile thing. Halfway down, my sister Lena angled her smile toward her friends. 2 years younger, she knew how to collect rooms. Careful, she chirped. I shifted to protect the hem. Fingers slid behind me, quick-sure, and hooked the gauze. The rip was cleaner than a slap. For a breath, everything disappeared except that sound. Then the house returned, shoes squeaking, a boy's laugh, the electronic shutter of a phone. A crescent of raw edge showed. The satin lining peaked like a tongue. Classmates hung in the doorway, covering their mouths, raising their cameras higher. It wasn't just fabric, it was a cue. You can call the driver. Lena sang, flash. Another. Heat climbed my neck. Somewhere a horn sounded. Somewhere the gym band started. All of that continued, only I stopped. I slid into the downstairs half bath and locked the door. The mirror above the tiny sink was freckled with old toothpaste. The bulb hummed. Mascara had broken into gray commas under my eyes. On the tank packing tape, a blister of safety pins, one bandage. I pressed the chiffon together and begged the fibers to agree. Tape stuck to my hands, not the dress. Pins bent. The fix looked like a scab. My phone shivered on the counter as messages climbed. A group chat announced the location. A screenshot of my flinch arrived with a caption ordering delight. Laughing icons multiplied. I turned the phone face down, cupped water into my palms, and breathed until the sting backed away. 10 minutes earlier, the dress had felt enchanted. Now it sat heavy, a costume for a role I hadn't auditioned for. I opened the door to a foyer performing itself, cologne, polyester, camera light. Lena's friends drifted toward the porch, thumbs moving in polished arcs. Text Mom. I'm with Zoe, Lena said without looking. The screen door clicked. The house shrank back to ordinary. I walked our block in heels, meant for photographs, not distance. Night air cooled my knees. A moth battered a porch light. Sprinklers combed a lawn. I counted steps because numbers don't heckle. At the corner, a hired car idled for a different girl in a different dress. I kept moving. When I came in through the kitchen, my mother looked up from her tablet, then down again like she needed to keep a recipe going. Please don't dramatize, she said, without muting her video. It's only a dress. It was my one night, I said, not a plea. Inventory. She exhaled like a meeting that had run long. My father closed his laptop, slowly, light sliding off his glasses. You and your sister don't need to compete, he said, which is a tidy way to say I'd already lost. Another ping. Lena, under rented lights at the gym, smile tuned to the lens. The caption tucked itself in like a blade. Spotlight belongs where it fits. I showed my mother the tear, the wobbling tape, the crooked seam. She frowned at the mess, not the person inside it. Borrow a cardigan, she said. Fix what you can in return, and apologize for making a fuss. Apologize for a wound I'd been given. The room tilted. Also, she added, returns aren't possible now. We're past the window. I paid half. I said shoes, hair, appointment ticket, because money is the only dialect we share. Each line came from an envelope in my bottom drawer. Choices have consequences. Nora, she answered, as if I'd chosen to be undone on a staircase. My father, comfortable because he'd been spared, said think applications and deadlines. Outcomes, what I needed, and what they would give were different currencies. I nodded like I'd heard the weather. I lifted the cardigan, set it neatly on a chair, and didn't go back to stand under phones. Upstairs, I eased the dress off and hung it on the back of the door. The slit opened like a mouth that knew my name. The phone buzzed, another tag, another loop of me on the stairs. I drowned the noise by laying the phone face down on my notebooks. Outside, the streetlight made a white circle on the pavement. Prom for me had ended early under that hum while music happened elsewhere. By morning, the joke had matured into content. I stopped refreshing. I counted hours. The campus coffee shop on River Avenue needed a closer. An early bus could slide me into a shift before school. When the manager called, I said yes. Stray threads clung to my coat lining when I clocked in little ghosts following me through mop water. Start whenever Maya said tying her apron. We wiped the pastry case restocked milk stack chairs. Tips went into a white envelope with my name penciled in the corner. Monotony had a shape I could trust pull twist stack place. Rent was coming. So were transit fares, lab fees, a calculator that wouldn't swallow batteries detergent from the discount shelf. Every dollar asked to be assigned before it arrived. On the way home, I stopped at a thrift shop with a flickering sign. In a basket near the register sat a small sewing kit, needles, dull thread, tiny scissors, chalk for straight lines. 99 cents. I slid it into my bag like a talisman. That afternoon, while the dishwasher labored, I taught my hands to hem. Not perfectly, not invisibly, but straight enough for fabric to remember how to behave. Tutorials online were too cheerful for 2 a.m., but the steps were true. Hand over hand, stitch by stitch, I learned the patience of people who can't afford to replace what breaks. The first seam puckered, then flattened beneath the iron. The second behaved. Relief clicked, the kind you get when symmetry returns to a thing pulled out of line. After last period, I signed into a library computer and printed what I could without replaying the post's notification headers, timestamps, little icons that anchored where something had lived. I slid the pages into clear sleeves from a packet of 10 and labeled them with a black pen. It wasn't retaliation, it was record-keeping names, dates. Locations, the skeleton of a story no one could laugh out of existence. When the guidance counselor stopped me in the hallway and asked if I was okay, I smiled with my mouth and said I was handling it. Tears are not currency I can spend in that building. She nodded, handed me a pamphlet whose edges were already soft from being handed to too many people, and moved on. On the bus home, I wore my headphones and watched the city unspool in gray streaks. My heartbeat relocated from my throat to my ribs. I counted breaths because numbers are honest and for 4 hold out for 6. The practice made space where panic had been. The second day was easier. The video that had hurt became a file name. The girl on the staircase was me, and not me, the way a reflection is you and also the glass. Saturday morning, wedged in a thrift store aisle between warped mirrors, I found a navy blazer that understood my shoulders. A notch in the lining marked where a tag had lived. When I tried it on, nothing in the glass jeered. I recognized the person in the jacket as someone who had stopped asking permission from rooms. At night, I hung the blazer by my desk. The dress lived in its plastic like an artifact. On the floor, sleeves clicked into a binder. I labeled them the way you label a map so that when you return you cannot get lost. I didn't explain myself online. I stopped answering invitations to be hurt. I kept breathing, counting, and working steadily. Quiet, I learned, isn't surrender. Quiet is a tool. It frees your hands. The binder grew in quiet inches. I didn't announce it to anyone. I just fed it. After my shift at the coffee shop, I slid into a corner seat with a pen that didn't skip and wrote dates on sticky flags, blue for posts, yellow for screenshots, green for receipts. The plastic sleeves whispered when I turned them. The page order made sense to me the way a well-set table does, timestamp at the top, source in the margin, a one-line note for context. I wasn't collecting outrage. I was collecting proof that could stand without me. Morning buses became a metronome. Route 12. At 6:03, Route 19. At 6:27, I learned which seats didn't squeak and which windows fogged. Earbuds and breath counted. The city slid past like graphite marks. At school, lockers clanged and laughter braided itself down the corridor. I walked through it the way a swimmer moves through a lane-lined surface, unbroken kick steady underneath. Lena floated on that current, easily carried by the murmurs she liked. I didn't look for her. The few times I caught the shape of her hair at the end of a hallway, a muscle jumped near my jaw and then settled. The video pulsed in the building like a fluorescent light you can't turn off. I didn't say her name out loud. Names were for forms and files. Work steadied itself into tasks that fit into my hands. Stack cups, prime the espresso handle, wipe the milk wand twice, count bills in the drawer, tuck tips into the envelope. Maya taught me the swift way to fold the pastry boxes so they didn't gape. I liked how routine could hold me when people didn't. On breaks, I stitched hems in the back room beside a mop sink chalk marking a straight line. Fabric began behaving when I asked nicely and firmly at the same time. The blazer hung on my chair like a small promise. I wore it when I printed at the library, a habit that came from nowhere and then felt necessary. The library smelled like dry paper and a clean kind of neglect. I signed into a public terminal and downloaded what my inbox offered notification headers, the outer shell of a post, without replaying its gut. I didn't need to see myself flinch again to prove it happened. On Wednesday, Ms. Rivera stopped at my locker while I rearranged textbooks to find a pen that always sank to the bottom. English teacher quiet voice shoes with low heels that didn't announce her before she arrived. She had the kind of eyes that waited for their turn, even when no one else was waiting. Office hours. Monday, she said softly. Not a question. A space. Bring your folder if you're willing. I nodded, the kind that says yes without spilling anything. The days stacked pale and serviceable. After last period on Friday, I cut through the lobby. The trophy case threw back versions of everyone glass flattening us into one surface. A banner announcing prom committee. Thanks you drooped at one corner. Someone had signed it with a heart and a crown. I kept moving. Paper waited for me. At the coffee shop that evening, a woman I recognized from school events stood at the pickup counter, hands knotted around her tote strap. Brunette in a navy cardigan, the kind of cardigan teachers wear when they've been on their feet too long. She ordered a decaf and didn't drink it. She kept glancing at my name tag like she was measuring the weight of it. When the line thinned, she came back. "You're Nora," she said, as if confirming to herself. "I don't want to embarrass you while you're working." She slid a business card under the napkin dispenser. "I'm Mrs. Ellison. I chaperoned last weekend." The card had community liaison in small letters. "If you ever need an adult to write a statement, I can." "I'm clocked in," I said, which was the same as not yet. She nodded. "I understand." When she left, she didn't take the decaf. I threw it away at closing, rinsed the cup, tucked the card into the envelope with my name on it. I didn't know what it would be yet, but it felt like a piece that might lock into another piece. Saturday's thrift run turned up seam tape that still had its paper backing a small brick of tailor's chalk with a clean edge and a pack of sleeves for the binder someone had priced wrong. I bought all 3 and went home with the satisfying weight of supplies. The house was empty. In the kitchen, the dishwasher hummed industrious and unbothered. I spread the dress across the dining table, lit from one side by a lamp my mother liked for ambience. The slit gaped. I chalked a line and practiced patience. In, out, tiny stitches that looked like how I measured breath. Threads used to break on me. Now they rarely did. They went where I planned, like a path finally honoring its drawn map. By Sunday evening, the binder looked less like a folder and more like a spine. I labeled sections on the first page. Posts, screenshots, direct messages. Witness. Witness had one entry, Mrs. Ellison's card. I left space on purpose. On the inside of the cover, I taped a checklist. It listed nothing dramatic, dates, legible sources, named duplicates, printed, external copy stored. It calmed me. I could run my finger down it and know what had been done. Monday arrived in the dull way reliable things do. I sat outside Ms. Rivera's door at lunch with the binder on my knees and a hollow under my ribs where food should have been. The bell ran out of urgency. The hallway emptied into its usual hush. She opened the door and stepped aside. "Come in if you like." She didn't look at the binder yet. She poured water from a pitcher into a paper cup and pushed it toward me. "You can set that down. We'll just look at what you're comfortable sharing." I set it on the desk. My hands were steady. That was new enough to notice without calling attention to it. She pulled the chair around, sat without using the desk as a barrier, and waited. I flipped the cover. The list breathed. "Walk me through your system," she said, and the way she said it made the word system feel like competence instead of obsession. I took her through the tabs, the color coding, the dates, the sources. I told her what I hadn't included, because I didn't need the spectacle, no looped videos, no funny edits. Just the architecture, the little bones that hold internet jokes together. When I stopped, she nodded. "Thank you," she said to the work, not to me, and something unclenched under my ribs. She reached into her drawer and took out a manila envelope, her mouth pressed into a line like she was deciding what order to show me in. I received copies of messages last night. I was not the only adult disturbed. She slid a paper toward me. A chaperone wrote to me. She wanted someone to intervene formally. She turned the page so the text faced me. Blue and gray bubbles. My mother's number at the top. My sister's name beneath it. The words behaved with a faint chill. Make sure Nora doesn't take center tonight. One tug will do. If anything tears, I'll cover it. 3 dots, then Lena's reply. Relax. Someone's filming. The crowd loves a mess. The kind of smile you can hear even when you can't see the face live between their lines. I didn't feel the chair under me for a moment. The printed bubbles were so small and so loud. A second page followed. A screenshot of a transfer $200. The memo line read, Ride plus video. The recipient's name meant nothing to me, Kay Bender. I knew that kind of blurring enough to read, not enough to argue a brand. Mrs. Ellison had annotated in the margin in neat teacher handwriting. Sent to Ms. Rivera, Antipeems Sunday. Original contact, parent volunteer who overheard. My mouth went dry. The room stayed level by choice. Ms. Rivera set another paper next to the first 2 as if building a careful line. Our prom treasurer forwarded an email chain, she said. She was being asked to reimburse decor purchases and a last-minute dress emergency replacement the night before the event. The phrase wore a suit. My mother had always liked good stationery. I leaned closer. The treasurer, someone I didn't know, had written, Please provide receipts. My mother responded, We'll send after weekend. Note entry as emergency seam issue replacement for damaged dress to maintain clarity. The email timestamp sat politely in the corner like little absolutes. I heard the heater click on. I thought it was her, I said. The girl on the stairs, the tug, the practiced smirk. It was them. Saying it didn't make heat rise. It organized the air. Ms. Rivera folded her hands not in prayer, but in stillness. This crosses policy lines here, she said, in that quiet voice that doesn't need to be loud to be firm. Harassment targeting coordination by an adult. It's not a dust-up between teenagers. She didn't reach to touch me. She didn't say she was sorry for the feeling. She looked at the papers, then at me like both needed attention. I don't want a hallway war, I said. The words tasted like metal again, but they were crisp. I don't want posters or speeches. I want a record that reads. My eyes went to the checklist I taped to the cover, as if it were a menu I could order from. Buy the book then, she said. No theater. We log what we have, we make duplicates. We deliver to the appropriate office with a written summary. We request a response in writing. We ensure copies are kept in more than one place. She pulled a form out of her drawer and wrote the date in the top corner. The pen made a soft scratching. Chain of custody, she added. I will note when I receive these prints and from whom. We worked like 2 people building shelves. She stamped the corner of each page with the school's tiny date stamp that lived in a red plastic casing. I initialed. She initialed. On a fresh sheet, she wrote a short summary in bullet points, a style that didn't perform outrage but would hold in a file. She used names, sparingly dates generously. We made 3 piles: original, student copy, administrative copy. She slid my stack into a new set of sleeves, stiffer than the ones I had, and clipped them shut. Keep 1 copy at home where you can reach it quickly, she said. Keep 1 outside your home. Do you have a place you trust? A locker at work? A friend who won't ask questions? I thought of the coffee shop's employee cubbies, the cheap metal door with a satisfying click. I thought of Maya, who could hold water in cupped hands without spilling it on anyone. Yes, I said. I have a place. She nodded. I'll carry the administrative copy to the office this afternoon with my statement and the chaperones. She paused. Would you like to be there when it's received? Her tone held no push. She was offering a seat, not a stage. No, I said. I'll come when there's a room where reading happens. She understood what I meant. We didn't need to say more. Before I left, she turned the last page toward me like a final square in a quilt. You are doing this cleanly, she said. Not brave, not strong, cleanly. I could accept that word. I slid the binder into my bag. It fit with a firm sound and didn't slump. In the hallway, sound returned to its usual tangle. A cluster of students laughed near the bulletin board, not at me, just at whatever lives in the middle of 17. I passed them. The light in the lobby had shifted. A slice of sun hit the floor in a bright diagonal. As I crossed it, I caught a reflection of the blazer in the trophy case glass. It looked like it belonged to someone who was not waiting for permission to proceed. I ducked into the counselor's office long enough to ask for a copy of a form that put a neat title on what we were doing. Request for administrative review. The secretary clicked her mouse 3 times and printed it. Fill out section A, she said. Leave the rest. The office will complete their portion. She asked my name. I spelled it once. She spelled it back to me correctly. Small relief, precise and ordinary. At lunch, I ate half an apple and 3 saltines at a table near the back where people let the quiet sit. I texted Lena 2 words we need to talk. It wasn't an invitation, it was punctuation. The dots that appeared and disappeared under her name didn't resolve. When the bell rang, I put the phone away without checking again. After school, I walked 2 extra blocks to the copy shop with the green awning because their machine didn't wrinkle paper. The clerk, a man with a pen behind his ear, ran my pages through the feeder and handed me a stack with warmth still in it. I counted them once, then again. I slid them into an envelope labeled outside copy and wrote Maya's name tiny in the corner as a reminder to myself about where to put it later. The last class of the day broke open in a slow scatter. I went to the library for an extra sleeve and saw Mrs. Ellison at a computer typing like each key press cost money. She looked up when I passed. We didn't exchange closeness. I wrote it, she said quietly, as if continuing a conversation we were both having in different rooms. I nodded once. Thank you. She returned to her keys. I took a sleeve from the front desk and left a quarter in the donation jar. On the bus to work, a little boy in a dinosaur t-shirt kicked the seat in front of him and apologized to it after each kick. His mother slept upright, mouth soft. I held the envelope on my lap like a thing that could be bent if I forgot about it. When the bus stopped near River Avenue, I stepped down and went around the back to the employee entrance. Inside, the locker door clicked shut on the copy with a sound I like, small, contained final. The shift moved like shifts do. Orders scribbled in a hand that always slanted steam, blooming 2 spills, 1 refund, 4 regulars who knew my name and didn't need to use it. In the lull, Maya leaned against the counter and watched the street through the glass. You're wearing that jacket like it belongs to you, she said. Not a compliment, more an observation. It does, I said because it did. A little before closing, my phone lit on the counter. A text from Lena arrived in a neat box, the color our phones had decided messages are. You're being dramatic. 4 dots. Mom says you should let things go. Another bubble, a photograph from somewhere. I recognized the gym streamers still clinging to the ceiling. Someone had written the word Queen on a mirror in glitter pen. The image tried to pull me by the sleeve back into a room I had left. I set the phone face down and finished restocking lids. Walking home, the lace of early spring air moved against my face. A siren rode itself across the avenue and faded. In my bag paper made its own soft sound. At a crosswalk, the indicator chirped. I crossed with a small group of strangers and felt less alone in their moving. When I reached our block porch, light moths floated like torn confetti. I let myself in quietly. Upstairs, the dress slept under its plastic like a specimen. I didn't look at it. I put the binder on my desk, slid the form from the counselor into the front pocket, and placed a pen on top. In my bottom drawer, the envelope of tips had thickened small bills, humble and honest. I assigned each one a job in my head, the same way I assigned each page a place in the binder. Rent, transit, fee, thread. Nothing grand, just a line of duties that would keep a life upright. Before bed, I took the blazer off the chair and hung it on the nail behind the door where it wouldn't wrinkle. I checked the window latch and then the second latch because sometimes the first one lies. In the quiet that followed, I could hear the low household conversations, the refrigerator exhaling the pipes turning over in their sleep, the almost silent give of old wood. My body recognized the list of its own needs and met them water stretch breath. No speeches. no declarations. It wasn't peace not yet, but it was a room where I could place things in order. Tuesday began early again. The bus was late, then too fast. In English, Ms. Rivera behaved like Ms. Rivera, which I appreciated. She didn't pull me aside or signal anything with her eyebrows. She taught a poem about how a single line break can change a sentence's meaning. People ignored the poem and stared at the window because a hawk had landed on the flagpole. I wrote the poem's last couplet in my notebook and underlined the verb twice. During study hall, the secretary from the main office called my name over the intercom in a voice that dissolved the air for a second. I packed my things and walked down. The office smelled like dry coffee and floor cleaner. A man I didn't know in a tie I wouldn't choose stood near the copier watching its light pass back and forth. The secretary handed me a stamped copy of my request for administrative review. Received, she said, tapping the box that said so. The date and time sat there like small obedient guards. "Is there anything else you need from me right now?" I asked. She shook her head. "We'll be in touch," she said. Not like a threat, not like a favor. Paper traveled through their hands into a file I wouldn't see. That was fine. I wasn't required to watch it work. Back in the hall, a group of seniors rehearsed lines for a play in whispers, the kind of whisper that insists on being heard. One of them flubbed and laughed so hard she cried. It sounded like breath finally returning after being held too long. I passed the blazer smoothing under my palm as I moved. In the afternoon, Mrs. Ellison caught me by the water fountain and raised her chin by a millimeter. A tiny salute you give someone you don't want to expose by greeting too loudly. I returned it. On my way to the bus, I walked past the gym. Custodians were rolling up the last of the rented carpet. The sound of tape lifting from a floor filled the space a patient rip repeated at even intervals. It made the hair on my arms prickle and then lie down. At home, I laid the administrative receipt behind the clear plastic of the binder's first page. It nested there correctly, a headwater feeding the rest of the thing. I drew a small square next to admin copy, delivered on my checklist, and filled it in with the tip of my pen. The square went black in a satisfying, even way. On the desk, the phone lit once and then fell still. I let it. That night, while the washer shuddered through its second spin, I practiced a stitch I'd seen in a video, a ladder stitch that disappears when you pull the thread just right. It took 3 attempts before it behaved. When it finally did, the seam lay flat and smooth, the mend almost invisible, but stronger than it had been before. I set the cloth down and watched the line hold. The sound of water calmed the house, then the heater joined in with its soft clicks. Somewhere outside, a fox screamed one of those unearthly sounds that makes you think the world is tearing until it doesn't. The noise passed, the line held. In the morning, I woke before my alarm, the part of me that keeps lists already taking attendance. I made tea and buttered toast, and ate both standing up the way you do when there are things to carry. The blazer went on last. The binder settled into the bag like a book that knew where it was going. I locked the door, checked the lock, and walked toward a day that had a place for paper, a place for work, and a place where reading happens. The streetlight at the corner clicked off as I reached it, and the sky moved one shade lighter without asking anyone's permission. The pass arrived during third period, pale green with my name in a square at the top. Main office at 12 p.m. I put it inside the binder's front sleeve so it wouldn't curl. The period took its time ending. When the bell finally scattered the room, I moved with the flow, and then against it toward a hallway that always smelled faintly of floor polish. The main office door gave a soft click. A receptionist with a precise bun looked up then at the clock. "You can wait there," she said, pointing to a bank of chairs that made everyone the same height. I sat and placed the binder on my knees like a level weight. A glass-fronted trophy case reflected the room's square light. On the wall, a framed mission statement talked in verbs. Ms. Rivera arrived first, a stack of folders under one arm. She sat next to me without asking questions and let her shoulder angle toward mine like a small shelter. The prom treasurer, her name tag read, Talia N.G., came in with a manila envelope clutched to her chest. She gave me a flicker of a nod that said, "I'm here for the paper in my hands." Mrs. Ellison slipped into a chair across from us and folded her cardigan's cuffs neatly, a person for whom neat is a relief. Then the office door opened again, and my family came in as if they were entering a waiting room for a flight. My mother's perfume reached me a breath before her voice. My father checked his watch, the polite version of impatience. Lena trailed behind in a sweater I recognized as mine from last winter. She didn't look at me. She looked past me the way you look past someone whose outline you know too well. "Principal Shaw will see you now," the receptionist said. His office held 2 windows, blinds set half open to show the parking lot in evenly cut stripes. He gestured to chairs arranged in a rough circle not facing the desk. "Let's sit together," he said, in a voice that had practiced not sounding like a verdict. Ms. Rivera took a seat slightly to the side where she could see everyone. I sat with the binder balanced on my lap, the spine warm from my hands. My mother chose the chair opposite mine. My father took the one nearest the door. Lena sat next to our mother and crossed one leg over the other heel, swinging a little the way you do when a room feels like an audience. "We're here to review a set of materials," the principal began. "We'll move methodically and I'll ask for focus. We're talking about behavior, not worth." He looked around the circle to make sure the sentence landed. "Ms. Rivera." She slid a slim folder across the low table to him and spoke like a person reading a weather report carefully. "These are copies of what I collected, screenshots forwarded by a chaperone, an email thread from the prom treasurer, and a transfer record provided as an image. Each page is stamped and initialed with time of receipt. A summary sheet is on top." Her tone held no ornament. The paper did the work. He read the summary. He didn't narrate, which I appreciated. He laid out the photos in a row, blue and gray message bubbles, my mother's number at the top. "Make sure Nora doesn't take center tonight," one line said in print that still held the warmth of a phone screen. "One tug will do. If anything tears, I'll cover it." Lena's reply sat right under it. "Relax. Someone's filming. The crowd loves a mess." The room did a small collective inhale that felt like a door closing. My mother's mouth found a line that looked tolerant. "Teen girls tease," she said. "You can make anything look ugly if you crop it correctly. I was being light. It was a joke that—" Mrs. Ellison lifted a hand not to interrupt loudly, but to mark her place. "I sent those after hearing the plan near the gym entrance," she said. "I was stationed at the check-in table. I chose to pass the details to someone who could act." Her voice didn't ask to be believed. It placed itself on the table next to the paper. Talia opened her envelope and passed a printout to the principal. He read, then handed it to me. The prom treasurer's email thread, my mother requesting a reimbursement line labeled "Emergency Seam Issue Replacement for Damaged Dress." Timestamped the day before prom. Mr. Shaw placed the transfer screenshot beside the emails. $200, he said almost to himself, as if labeling an image. The memo ride plus a video. Recipient K. Bender. His finger did not land anywhere near me or anyone in particular. He let the row of paper exist without pointing. Lena's heel stopped swinging. "Everyone plays around," she said, reaching for the older sister she preferred to recognize. "No one got hurt. It's just—" It wasn't just. The words came out in an even line before I thought to plan them. I slid the binder forward and opened it to the first tab. The checklist sat visible dates, legible sources named duplicates, printed external copy stored. "These are my copies," I said. Posts, screenshots, direct messages, and witness information. No loops, no edits. Names are redacted where they should be. My father leaned forward as if squinting at fine print. "Nora, this is unnecessary. You're inflating." Mr. Shaw raised one hand, not to silence but to structure. "We're not debating feelings. We're addressing actions within the scope of school policy." He consulted a page in his own folder, something with grids and numbers. Harassment and targeted humiliation coordinated with an adult. He looked at my mother briefly, the way a referee looks at a boundary line. "This is not a prank." My mother folded her hand so tightly the skin went pale around her ring. "I was protecting Lena," she said, voice smoothing itself. "It's hard for her to live under Nora's shadow. You know how competitive girls are. You paid a stranger to film my dress being torn," I said. The sentence didn't increase in volume. It simply left my mouth and lived in the room. "You rehearsed a reimbursement line before it happened. You told me later to borrow a cardigan and apologize for a fuss you purchased." Lena's eyes flickered to our mother, then down. If there was a flinch, it hid behind good mascara. Ms. Rivera angled her body toward the principal slightly. We're asking for a response aligned to policy, she said. Immediate in writing. He nodded. Here's the administrative action, he said, returning to the grid. Effective tomorrow, 2-week suspension for Lena removal from student leadership roles for the remainder of the term, and a written apology submitted to the office. He looked at my mother again. For the adult coordination component, the school will file a letter of concern with the district. You are not permitted to contact staff regarding this matter, except through the designated channel. Any retaliation will trigger additional discipline. My mother's face arranged itself into wounded disbelief. Retaliation? We're the ones being accused here. This is outrageous. She turned to me with a softness I knew as performance. Family handles? Family matters privately. Private, I said, is how this survived. I didn't let the end of the sentence curl up. It stayed flat. I have terms that our mind is set. I took a printed page from the binder's back pocket and placed it on the table. A draft email I'd written and rewritten until the verbs behaved. Remove the posts and the video. Provide a public apology naming what happened without minimizing. Reimburse what I paid shoes. Ticket, hair, appointment, phone bill portion for that month, seam materials and dry cleaning. Send receipts, and I'll subtract what the school reimburses. Lena stared at a point on the carpet, as if memorizing a pattern. I'm sorry, she said to the floor. The words arrived small, unsorted. Look at your sister when you say that Mrs. Ellison said not unkindly. It was the same voice she probably used when asking a student to try the line again with feet planted. Lena raised her eyes to mine. I'm sorry, she said again. This time shaped toward me, though it still carried the thinness of someone forced to read from a card. I will not sign anything admitting my mother began. No one needs your signature for what already exists, Mr. Shaw said. He wrote 2 notes on a form with a pen that made a decisive dot for each period. You'll receive the district letter by mail and email. Security has been notified to monitor the removal of content. This office will require the written apology by Friday at 3. Copies will be kept. He stood to mark the end of the circle. Chairs sighed as people rose. Papers slid back into folders in reverse order. Lena's sweater caught on the arm of her chair. She freed it carefully, a person learning to hate friction. In the hallway outside the office, the sound of a distant bell let a class trade places with another. Ms. Rivera touched the edge of the binder with a fingertip approval without ownership. I'll walk these to the admin copy room, she said, and I handed her the stack stamp for them. Talia passed me a photocopy of the reimbursement email thread with one sticky note. For your records, TN, Mrs. Ellison folded her hands and gave me the kind of small nod you give when you and another adult have done what you're supposed to do. My mother adjusted her purse strap like resetting a story. Be reasonable, she said softly, the way people say please when the door is already closed. My father said nothing, which was sometimes worse. I turned my phone on and opened the draft. My thumbs were steady. I addressed it to the 2 email accounts I had for my mother, copied Lena, and added a subject line that made no promises. Terms regarding removal and restitution. I sent it. The progress bar slid across the top of the screen and disappeared. That was all. No fanfare. The binder went back under my arm like a familiar book. I crossed the lobby. The banner that had thanked the prom committee had been taken down. 2 strips of tape remained like pale parentheses on the wall. As I pushed through the door into the thin afternoon light, a gust lifted the edge of my blazer and let it fall. The parking lot smelled like warm asphalt. I breathed in, held and let the breath go. The line held. The email reply arrived before homeroom, a short line from my mother, acknowledging receipt of my terms, followed by a longer paragraph structured like a weather report. Neutral nouns, no ownership of wind. By lunch, the posts were gone. The link that had once tried to swallow me returned a polite error. I printed that nothingness like it was a document, stamped it with the date in the library, and slid it into the binder's first sleeve. The square I'd drawn next to content removed darkened under my pen. On Thursday, the auditorium lights hummed over rows of students and a wooden podium that usually belonged to theater kids. Lena stood with a single sheet of paper, knees locked the way new speakers forget not to do. Her voice didn't crack. It also didn't decorate. She named what she'd done, who was involved, and the harm it caused without adjectives, just nouns and verbs all the way through. She did not look for me in the seats. I didn't look for her either. When it was over, the room shifted the way it does when a long note ends. By afternoon, the office forwarded a letter with the district's crest in the header and 3 signatures under its block of text. The language was administrative, which has its own dignity: received, reviewed, documented, actioned. I read the paragraph twice not to taste it. There's no flavor in that kind of paper, but to recognize its weight. The copy-stamped file went into the administrative section. The copy-stamped student slid under my checklist. My name was spelled correctly in both places. Restitution arrived in chunks. A bank transfer landed in my account with a memo line that told the truth in 6 words. A cashier's check covered the seam tape, chalk, and dry cleaning. I photographed each receipt before filing them and placed the originals in a small envelope behind direct messages. When I got to phone bill, I did the math twice and sent the number with a scan of the months in question. No bargaining, no tone. The numbers made their own case. By Saturday, the envelope in my drawer thinned correctly where it should, and my shoulders lowered a fraction I hadn't realized they were holding. Ms. Rivera met me after school with a stack of scholarship forms and a recommendation typed on thick paper that held ink without bleeding. She had filled the letter with specific states, verbs, evidence of work, rather than adjectives about character. We sat in her room with the door open and signed what needed signatures. At home, I revised my statements at the kitchen table until the commas behaved while the dishwasher ran laps in the background. I mailed the envelopes from the blue box beside the post office where pigeons like to hold conferences. June brought a subject line that slid a key into a lock inside my chest. The college downtown had space for me in a summer bridge program with early housing. I read the email 3 times alone in my room before telling anyone. The dorm smelled like new paint and dust. The key they issued turned smoothly, the door shut with a clean click, a sound I decided to trust. I stood in the small square of quiet and ironed the navy blazer over a towel because there wasn't an ironing board. The wrinkle near the shoulder yielded in increments. I'm patient when things do. At home, the ground rules shifted from a list in my head to sentences with subjects. I said them at the dining table without raising my voice. If you participate in or fund the humiliation of me, you do not get access to me. There isn't an appeal. My mother reached for a tone of hurt and folded it back when it found no surface to cling to. My father's silence did what it always does, sat in the chair like a person. I collected the last of my notebooks and took the bus to the dorm with 2 bags and the binder under my arm. Sewing turned into something more solid than practice. A neighbor of Maya's brought in a dress whose zipper's teeth had separated from the tape. Then a cousin asked about sleeves on a blouse that bit her arms. Then a woman from the copy shop wanted a skirt to hang straight on hips the pattern had never met. I priced the work in numbers that respected both fabric and time. Cash folded into an envelope replaced pitying looks. I liked the way a straight seam could reorder a day. When school returned to its next season, I sent the principal a short email. If the school needed a pair of steady hands before the winter formal, I could be in the family and consumer science room after work with an iron chalk and patience. He said yes with 1 sentence and a list of dates. The first evening, room 114 filled with the sound of steam and the quick conversation strangers have when they're being fitted. I knelt with a measuring tape between my teeth, marked a hem with a whisper of chalk, and asked 3 times before putting in a pin. Girls who had believed glamour was a price tag watched a skirt rise to meet their shoes and grinned like the lights had swung toward them. In November, a message from Lena arrived without glitter. I was cruel, it read. I wanted the room. I looked at the words and didn't argue with them. My reply was short and even. You don't get to use me as a stage. She typed dots and stopped. I put the phone away. Holidays came and went in a measured way. I made a pie for the dorm kitchen that didn't set right in the middle and tasted fine anyway. When the custodian rolled the trash bin down the hall, the building hummed like a big animal sleeping. I boxed the torn dress after finals week. Not in a ceremony, just a clean afternoon with the window open. I layered tissue over the fabric so nothing bled onto anything else, slid a label inside the lid, and wrote 3 words for myself in block letters for records only. The binder went onto the top shelf of the closet I now owned a part of, just far enough back that it didn't look like it needed to be touched every day. The blazer hung where a hand could reach it without looking. On a cold morning, I walked past the old school on my way to the bus and glanced through the glass at the case of trophies and crowns. Their gold looked fragile up close, thin metal startled into shape and glued onto velvet. My reflection ghosted over the plastic points and then left them alone. Outside, breath made small clouds as I crossed the street. Somewhere downtown, the coffee grinder ran in its predictable roar. Somewhere upstairs, a sewing machine I could borrow warmed under a soft light. My body remembered the count it trusted, inhale, hold, release, and matched the rhythm of my feet. The day did not ask for permission to begin. It began. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.